perfect standard is who we now emulate, and we follow him now. And so that's why I say it's not just being a good person. You now have to be, you now have to come to realization that you're a sinner and that you need Jesus Christ to cleanse you and to wash you, to make you brand new. And then he gives you his Holy Spirit. And when his Spirit is inside of you now, he enables you to be able to overcome, not through your own willpower, but to be able to overcome your temptations, those sins and those things that stop you from becoming more like him. And that's
Sadly, this is such an underexploited talking point. It's a notion that the Holy Spirit works continuous sanctification in the believer, causing him or her to grow in holiness and become, as the young preacher just said, more Christ-like. Many Christian preachers, like this young man, make the claim of the Holy Spirit indwelling them and working within them a sort of regeneration over time. I want to explore the logical outworkings here, which I believe many preachers really have not thought about in great depth. The implication here is essentially a falsification test. This belief can be demonstrated to be false, practically demonstrated to be false by Christians themselves. Let me explain. What is essentially being said here is that a Christian who has been a Christian for a pretty lengthy amount of time should be able to be more morally upright than anybody else. Let's take somebody who has been a Christian for at least a decade. This person, in theory, would have had the Holy Spirit working within them and making them more Christ-like for a decade. That's 10 years. However, this belief is at loggerheads with what we observe within the Christian community on the ground in real life. If this Christian preacher truly believes the Holy Spirit works within Christians, then how can he explain why Christians are often surpassed by other faith groups in self-discipline? Self-discipline here referring to the ability to avoid sins and do righteous actions. Or how about the fact 75% of Christians are mired with struggle against porn? And I don't say this in any jest. I don't say this in any mockery. Martin Saunders uses a straw poll, which he conducted in 2014, to conclude, this is a rough conclusion, you can make of it what you want, 75% of Christian men are engaging with porn on, let's say, a monthly basis. Let's delve further into this investigation. Within those stats, there are some interesting details. The main one that I want to highlight, 42% of Christians said they would describe their behavior as compulsive or an addiction. Are you seriously trying to tell me 4 out of 10 Christians have the Holy Spirit in them, yet they can't beat a serious addiction or compulsion to porn? This is online lust, material of an adult nature. If, as the young preacher believes, the Holy Spirit is working on these people and leading them to become holier, then why can't they break free from their struggles with porn? Are you not indirectly insulting the Holy Spirit here in vocally declaring that you have the Holy Spirit in you, whilst you yourself struggle with this issue of lust or other issues of lust or other sins? Serious pastors admit they are struggling with lust too. And these guys have been Christians for a long time.
Other women?
Yes. That's, I mean, obviously I'm not just in some continual state of lusting after other women, but there are times when I would think a wrong thought in that way. I mean, I think that that's a temptation that's common to man. I'm not proud of that. I'm ashamed of that.
Just so we are clear, I'm not railing against men for having issues with lust. We're all humans. But my concern here is purely a religious concern. Now, other men of other faiths, non-Christians that is, can manage to resist the temptation of porn. The preacher, this preacher, presumably believes this is done without the Holy Spirit. So is this not proof enough to suggest the preacher's claim of the Holy Spirit being within Christians is spurious at the very least? Surely the preacher, as a Christian, would not want to suggest non-Christians, those who don't have the Holy Spirit in his mind, are capable of greater moral feats than those led by the Holy Spirit. To throw another problem at the preacher's reasoning, what of those Christians who have been in the church for decades promoting and defending church doctrines, and then they leave the church because they either lose faith in various doctrines such as the idea of the Trinity? Doesn't that not throw a spanner in the works for the preacher's claim of the Holy Spirit working within Christians and causing them to grow in Christian holiness over time? If this is the case, why are we seeing older Christians leaving Christianity? Surely, if this was the case, no decades-old Christians would leave the faith.
Who am I? And so I was actually born into the Christian faith. So my parents were actually Roman Catholics before I was born, but they eventually became Protestant. And you know, when I was born, they were already Protestant. So I was born into that Protestant faith, and pretty much grew up in like an Assemblies of God denomination, Pentecostal, very influenced by like the Word of Faith movement. And you know, as I got older, I got involved in ministry when I was pretty young, you know, in leadership, and I taught apologetics at a Presbyterian church. I was even assistant youth director at Assemblies of God. I was a pastor at a Southern Baptist church, and I was an evangelist at another Assemblies of God church in California. And so I eventually became a missionary to the Philippines. And you know, so I was basically, this was my life. You know what I'm saying? I even went to school studying theology, got my bachelor's degree in theology, got my master's. I studied a lot of apologetics ever since I was 17. And even with, like, you know, what you would call some of the evangelical heavyweights of the apologetic scene, I was able to sit under some of those guys. And so, like I said, this was my life. I was all about sharing the gospel, preaching, defending the faith, etc., etc. And so just to finally put it out there, today I'm going to be talking about why I am no longer a Christian.
Paul of Tarsus in Galatians 5 lists what he believes is the fruit of the Spirit. Let's read this carefully. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. I want you to notice this is all stuff you can observe in a Buddhist, Muslim, Sikh, Jew, or even, dare I say, in some atheists. But also notice the words peace, gentleness, and meekness. Our Christian friends may be a little surprised to see a couple of rabbis suggesting Christians are arguably the most violent people in history.
The world has never seen so much warfare, bloodshed, suffering, confusion, inhumanity, etc. as since the coming of Jesus, and very much, if not most, unfortunately, in his name.
One might even say that what nation has not only not brought peace to the world, but has been most warlike? Those of Christendom. What nation has brought upon us such strife in the world? That of Christianity.
How is this if Christians have the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit leads them to peace and gentleness? How can other groups, Buddhists, Sikhs, Muslims, etc., be seen as more peaceful and gentle than Christians? So what exactly do Christians believe the Holy Spirit gives them that others cannot achieve in character and moral standing? Should Christians not rethink their beliefs about the Holy Spirit? Is this not ultimately a belief that practically insults the Holy Spirit? And that's a rhetorical question for our Christian friends to wrestle with in a serious-minded fashion.